Thank you so much for being here. As we said, my name is Jalondra A. Davis. I am a scholar of science fiction fantasy studies as well as Black literary and cultural studies. I am a mermaid, and I'll explain what that means in a second, and I am host of the Merwomanist podcast. In order to introduce you to what mermaiding looks like, I just have a short segment from a feature story that my university did on some of my mermaid activities. Project is that Black people also need access to whimsy. We also need access to fantasy. We also need access to magic. And I just don't think that there's any more awe-inspiring image or idea than that of the mermaid. The early months of the pandemic, I was watching professional mermaid videos, and it was like stress relief. And that's what inspired me. And I've never had time before. I'm gonna do this. So I finally took lessons. So it's like it actually motivated me. I'm still a baby mermaid because I'm still early in this journey. I just learned to swim a few years ago, partly because I have a young child and because I want to be a mermaid. I loved Disney growing up. I loved princesses. I loved fairy tales because for me as a little girl, that was kind of all you had in terms of female. Okay, so I just wanted to give you a quick shot of this because I just wanted you to see what mermaiding looks like. So mermaiding is the act of swimming with a monofin and a tail skin that you put over the monofin, and in a dolphin kick motion, right, the dolphin kick swim, in order to mimic the look of a real mermaid. The mermaiding combines the aquatic sport of mermaiding with cosplay. Cosplay is an activity where people dress up as in costumes typically as characters from well-known properties within science fiction, fantasy, comics, and anime. The difference for mermaids is that mermaids usually develop their own character, their own mersona, as we call them, which is your identity and your personality as a mermaid. So my mersona is Mami Melicin. And Mami Melicin is a combination of the African water spirit, Mami Wata, and of Melicin, which is the story of a serpent sea fairy woman who married a king and made him promise not to look at her in her bath once a week, but of course he broke that promise and suffered for it. So the first professional mermaid I would say is probably Annette Kellerman. Annette Kellerman lived from 1886 to 1975. She was a swimmer, a diver, an athlete, an actress, a dancer, and she performed as kind of a mermaid or an aquatic female character in several silent films, most of which are lost to us today. She is the originator of the one-piece bathing suit. Women used to have to swim in these very cumbersome kind of petticoat things. She appeared in a one-piece form-fitting bathing suit on a beach in 1907, where she was promptly banned from, right? But the bathing suit I was actually for a few years known as the Annette Kellerman, and in an interesting sort of exhibition where she swam in front of a panel of men, her body was described as being that of the perfect woman, which is a title that she found to be quite ghastly. So she performed as a mermaid. She did these silent films. So I would probably say she's one of the origins of mermaiding. But the most commonly, I think, kind of more well-known story is that of the Weeki Wachee Mermaid Show at the Weeki Wachee State Park in Florida. This show was founded in 1947 by a swimmer and diver named Newt Perry, and he specifically said that he wanted to find swimmers who didn't look like swimmers. So the young women who performed as mermaids at Weeki Wachee had to be extremely athletic. They had to dive down, I don't remember the depth of they had to dive down this long tube and perform in this underwater theater that was constructed in a natural spring. They have air hoses down there, but they have to be good at holding their breath. They would perform water ballet routines. The original Weeki Wachee mermaids did not wear tails, and they were actually called aquabelles after another aquatic spectacle, the Aquascape, which was held at the 1939 World Fair. So the Weeki Wachee mermaid show, they were quite glamorous. Some of them became quite famous in their time. It was kind of a symbol of post-World War II prosperity, and it was a way to sort of safely exhibit a kind of erotic display of the female body. One of the specific things about the mermaid show was that it was very specifically a requirement for the mermaids to be young, white, thin, pretty, and white, right? And even though that was removed from the official rules, sometimes in the 1970s, we can see from the Weeki Wachee mermaids today that not that much has changed. So in 1984, Disney premiered the film Splash. Splash actually precedes the animated The Little Mermaid, which we know and love so well, by about 5 years. And Splash is a really pivotal moment for professional mermaiding because the first people to actually become sort of the modern professional mermaids are people who probably watched this film as children. So for the film Splash, there was a tail engineered for Daryl Hannah to actually swim underwater in, which was very realistic. It's very beautiful. To me, this is still like hands down one of the best mermaid tails ever. I prefer it to the CGI ones we see today. And so, like, lots of young women were inspired. And so in the early 2000s, you started to see people who were engineering tails of their own and becoming professional mermaids. So the person who's largely thought to be the first modern professional mermaid is Hannah Fraser, otherwise known as Hannah Mermaid. And she's known for these really exquisite, elaborate underwater spectacles. One of the key sort of components of a lot of professional mermaids' persona is that of ocean conservation and of like environmental activism. And they largely do this through visual culture and visual campaigns that connect the fantasy figure of the mermaid as a sort of ambassador to the ocean and to the natural world. So we see here an image of a mermaid holding a plastic water bottle, looking very angry about it, and another image of Hannah Fraser, Mermaid Hannah, swimming with, I believe tiger sharks. So while some of these campaigns have had some successes, some of Hannah Mermaid's campaigns have been associated with getting certain species moved into protected categories. There are also wildlife specialists who are very critical of these kinds of performances that require these kind of close interactions with wildlife, which is thought to be really harmful. So even though professional mermaiding is, whimsical, and I would say a positive, productive activity, it's not without its problems and its problematics. One thing we may notice, going back from Annette Kellerman, the so-called perfect woman, through Daryl Hannah, through Hannah Fraser, through the Weeki Wachee mermaids, is some similarity in how they look, right? Thin, white, cis women, conventionally attractive. And this is not all there are. There are so many of us in the professional mermaiding community. And so this image is from the 2022 Afro Mermaid Summit, which is an event that I attended. That's me over there in the corner, because this is 2022. I wasn't swimming very well at that time. So I was like, I'll sit on the rock. But in the center is Carrie Wata. She is the founder of the Afro Mermaid Company and Afro Mermaid Summit. And it's a gathering focused on Black mermaids, but everyone is welcome. And you can see from here, how many people there are in the mermaiding community and how diverse we are. We have every color, we have every shape, we have every age, we have mermen, we have gender non-binary mermaids, trans mermaids, and we all come together just in the celebration of fantasy and connection to the water. So, this is kind of more of a recent phenomenon. While there have been Black mermaids for as long as professional mermaiding has been a thing, they haven't always been very visible, and there haven't always been that many of us. And why is that? Racism. The answer is always racism, right? So if you ever think about our public institutions and our public infrastructures, whether it's schools, transportation, social services, and wonder why this systematic disinvestment in all of these public systems over the last 40 or so years, the answer is racism. Once Black people win access to something, it is disinvested in. And the same thing is true for pool infrastructure. Originally, this is something that I found kind of recently in doing research around this, is that in the early 20th century, when pools were being constructed in urban communities, they were actually for the purpose of hygiene, right? They were bathing pools, and they were constructed near tenement communities where people were living in these apartment buildings where they didn't have indoor plumbing, and this is when we're like finding out about germs and how diseases spread, and you have all of these people like white immigrant communities, working class communities, Black people who are moving into urban centers through the Great Migration, who are living in really close proximity to each other. So these bathing pools were constructed as places for people to bathe, which is how we get bathing suits, right? The term bathing suits. And so originally, these were not racially segregated, right? And Black people were even more likely to know how to swim than white people at this point in history. They were gender segregated. So men bathed together, and men typically would bathe naked, and women bathed together, and they would have their like petticoats, right? But as swimming moved from like being considered, as swimming moved into more of like being considered a fitness activity, like later in the early 20th century, going towards mid-century, and as pools started to be envisioned as a space of recreation and for families to gather rather than as like a hygiene space, they were gender desegregated. And when they were gender desegregated, they were racially segregated because of the anxieties, particularly around Black men and white women having access to one another in the intimate space of the pool, right? So those kind of ideologies, that we usually associate with the rural South were entirely well and alive in these northern urban areas. So systematically, as pools were desegregated, Black people were excluded from these pools. There weren't adequate pool infrastructure that was developed for Black people and Black communities, and we didn't take this laying down. So there was a lot of protests, and one of the major sites of struggle during the Civil Rights Movement was over aquatic spaces of beaches and pools. So the image on the top is of a demonstration in 1964 when white and Black youths swam into a hotel pool together in St. Augustine, Florida, and the hotel owner, James Brock, poured acid in the pool. The image below here is of Black men attempting to get access to a private pool, because one of the things that happened when pools were desegregated, similar to schools, was that white people started building their own private pool clubs and building their own private pools in their backyards that they could then exclude Black swimmers. The image on the top right is of what is called a ghost pool. There were all of these incredibly huge, just very elaborate pools that were constructed during the height of pool construction in sort of the 1920s, 1930s. But after Black people won access to these pools through civil rights struggles in the 1960s, white swimmers stopped attending the pools, the revenues went down, and eventually the pools were closed. The image on the bottom is a scene from Barry Jenkins' Moonlight, and I included that because for those of us who are in kind of Black aquatic studies, which is a thing, academia, you could do anything you want. But for those of us who are, doing work with Blackness and water, this scene is just a very powerful one, not only for its display of a kind of tenderness and intimacy of Black masculinity that we don't see very often in mainstream media, but also for this Black man who is teaching a child how to swim. And it's a very powerful scene when you think about it against the backdrop of this history, which has led to huge disparities in Black people's swimming proficiency and in drowning rates of both children and adults. So I bring this all up to come back to mermaids to say that it's about more. Like, it's the fun and it's the whimsy, but it's about more than that, right? It's also about reclaiming access to water. which everyone should get to have access to. So I just want to close on looking at some more Black mermaids. So even if we haven't always been super visible in the Black mermaiding community, Black women have always been mermaids. Many of the deities in African diasporic religions take the form of mermaids. Yemoja, Mami Wata, Oshun, Olokun. There's all of these deities that take the form of mermaids. We have our own mermaid folklore. We have our own mermaid popular culture. I don't know if anyone remembers Sade. People know Sade, the band. So there was a 1992 music video for No Ordinary Love where Sade appeared as a mermaid and sort of enacted the Little Mermaid storyline. A less commonly known example is when Beyonce was a mermaid in the 1992 Destiny's Child video With Me. And of course, we know about Halle Bailey being cast as Ariel in Disney's live action The Little Mermaid. One interesting thing that I have found in my interviews of Black people in the mermaiding community, which is one of the chapters of my book, is that many, many people started their journey in 2019. And so my friend Mermaid Tiva, who was pictured in that video with me, had already been a proficient swimmer. She was already a lifeguard, but she said that when Halle Bailey became Ariel, that gave her the courage to put on a tail, right? So it's been a very pivotal and powerful experience for those of us in the Black mermaiding community to be able to see her inhabit that role, even if they did use a CGI tail. Carrie Wata, again, is a good friend of mine, the founder of the Afro Mermaid Summit, and I wanted to talk, her persona is Carrie Wata. So again, she is inspired by Mami Wata, who is an African water goddess, but it also means Carrie Wata. She's Puerto Rican, she's from the Caribbean. Carrie Wata, Carrie Water. She sees herself as an activist carrying water to her people. So in addition to the usual kind of gigs that professional mermaids do, aquarium shows, birthday parties, corporate events, creating digital content and digital media is like a big thing in the professional mermaiding world, brand partnerships. But in addition to that, she does swimming lessons. She does swimming experiences, an introductory swimming experience for both children and adults, right? Like I learned how to swim at 37 years old, right? And then when I go to the Afro Mermaid Summit, they have beginning swim classes, right? And so this is not something that you find in all of the mermaid spaces. There's also something called Black Mermaid Day, which was founded by Tranquil Ashes, who is a cosplayer. And it was founded to elevate visibility of Black mermaids and people in fantasy, but it was also founded as a movement to reconnect Black people to the water. So I just say all this, and some of my favorite mermaids, you know, these are all friends of mine, the Seashell Queen, Clover Jean Mermaid. They both talk about mental health in the context of water and mermaiding as a way of accessing mental health. Mermaid Shea Monique, who is the founder of the Society of Fat Mermaids, so she talks about mermaiding and body positivity. And Mermama Naja, who actually started mermaiding long before 2019, she actually created mermaid tails for Playboy, for models in Playboy magazine. But she is considered one of the like sort of mothers of the Black mermaiding community. So this is a rich, it's a vivid, it's a vibrant culture. And for many of us, it's not just fun, it's not just fantasy, that's part of it, but it is very personal and it's very political, and it's about claiming access to something that we should have always had. Thank you.